So your browser's got a list of certificate authorities you can trust. There's a bunch of different vendors. You get Thought, Zero Trust, VeriSign, all these different companies. You've got different levels of SSL checks, level 1, 2, 3, I don't know if there's 4. And they do different validation on you. I think validation of level 1 just checks you on the domain name. Validation of level 2 probably checks your company name. You can go and check this online. If you're doing e-commerce, you should be using a higher level. And if you're doing e-commerce and you've got like transactions, your merchant account will probably require you to have a certain level of certificate, and they check your company exists and do some basic background checks on that there. But at the end of the day, the system's only as good as these checks are, and it's only as good as you trust these authorities. There was a couple of cases recently. There was a Dutch certificate authority. Yeah. And they're still around. They haven't disappeared, which is amazing. Their private key was compromised. Someone made a fake certificate for Google.com, and 300,000 people in Iran had their connections to Google.com broken into by the Iranian government, which is massive. That happened a couple of years ago, maybe last year?
Yeah,
last year. And I mean, when your certificate authority, the only thing you're actually doing is protecting a private key. And that's what you failed at doing. It's a little bit disturbing. So,
the government was also using DigiNotar for all of the public access to government.
No, so the Dutch government was using compromised CA issues.
So I think actually what happens is only certain certificates were revoked. There's systems and browsers to hand out sort of revoked lists and so on. But DigiNotar are still there. I remember reading the bug list of this thing, and they were talking about it, and they didn't decide to remove DigiNotar, which I thought was amazing. So there you go.
Oh, that's one thing you could do, though. If you're really paranoid, you could go into your Linux or Mac account, find out where in your system stores all the CA certs, remove the ones that you don't like. There are usually 2 that you really don't want to be in there. The Dutch one, what's it called again?
DigiNotar. Yeah.
DigiNotar. And another one is the Chinese government's web CA certificate. Remove those 2, definitely.
Okay. Well, if you're doing this, if you get certificates, do get from a reasonable authority. And the risk is if you've bought from DigiNotar because they were cheap, you've now got a problem if that gets pulled. So, and your app stops working, it can no longer communicate with your server because it's been removed from the iPhone. So just be sensible with stuff.
Wasn't there an artist CA that was compromised last year? Was it Komodo or something?
I know the name for, I don't know why though.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But there's been a couple recently.
Yeah.
But anyway. I think that's the end of everything. So
yeah.
Got some resources on there. Everyone knows CVE. People don't know CVE. Hands up if you've not heard of CVE. Hands? No one has? Okay, it's a couple of people. There's some lists out there that you can sign up to for getting announcements about security things. I think there's another one called CERT, Commuter Emergency Response
CERT,
Team.
Yeah.
There's Debian Security Announce, which is quite useful because they do cover a lot of software. CVE is another one that's out there.
Yeah.
They're not going to cover everything. You can't just rely on them for tracking your package vulnerabilities, but if it's something big and you're using it, and it's big enough that someone's probably going to write a worm that's going to exploit it, hopefully it's on there and you'll know about it. And if it was jQuery, then
yeah,
definitely
it's not complete, but it's fairly complete.
Yeah. Which are the ones web? These are 2 you've put
So
on.
yeah, Web Application Hackers Handbook. It's the textbook used by freshman Stanford computer science students when they're taking a web application security class. So it's actually quite useful, and if it's used by a first-year student, then it should be quite digestible. Founders of security, what every programmer needs to know is receptacle. So it's basically this book, which I think we stole a lot of material from this book.
I should note, Jimmy didn't write this book. He's not plugging his own book.
Right.
So
So yeah, we forgot about the disclaimer. So none of us are security experts. So take what our recommendation.
If your site is hacked tomorrow, don't sue us, please.
Yeah. So this book is written mostly by Neil Daswani. So I think he used to have a course on computer security at Stanford as well. Same origin policy is a link to Google's browser sec project and a spec of what same origin policy does and should not do, how to get around it. Applied cryptography is another classic.
You're smiling at.
Yeah, classic textbook.
It's pretty full on. Like, if you're really crazed, go and read that book, but it's going to be hard going.
If you want to do a lot of math for the next year or 2 or 3 or 4 years, then read that book. It's written by Bruce Schneier, very...
He's described as the Chuck Norris of cryptography?
Something like that, yeah. The guy basically invents cryptography. So if you read his book, if you understand his book, then you're good to go. So questions, discussions, anything that you want to know? Taiwan? And India, are you still there?
Taiwan's here. Thank you very much.
I like this. When he talks, we get a picture of Taipei 101 showing up. It's good.
Yeah. Google Hangout is good. Do you have any questions?
Just
you want to know?
You know, a lot of this started because Jimmy posted something about Ruby on Rails, and there was a Hacker News article about some guy, and it was pretty scary because it was like once they get into your infrastructure, then all kinds of things break. You guys know anything else about that, or have any details?
Right. So what happened with Ruby on Rails was basically 2 variations of the same flaw, which is
the JSON parser on by default.
Let me switch back to the slide there. It's did I go for it?
You went past it, yeah.
Oh, no, actually, I didn't.
Was it something or was it something else?
It's so basically what happened was it's a kind of code execution vulnerability. So Ruby on Rails for the longest time had a JSON parser or JSON serializer and deserializer called YAML, YAML. And YAML has the ability to read a specially formatted string that basically allows you to initialize any arbitrary object. So you could potentially, if you're using a PyYAML, for example, on the Python side, you could arbitrarily initialize
an object.
So it's your user object, right? And then you can query into the database and fish out whatever you want, or just wipe the database.
So it's equivalent of Python pickle, basically. And they were taking any input from the outside world, and this was on by default. You could find a Ruby server, just send a string to it, instantiate an object, and there was one object in particular that, if you loaded it up, you could have put some code in there that had just ran second on the constructor of the object.
Right. So I think one of the things that we really want to get across is that when you are bringing in an external dependency, always know what it does. Okay. In the case of YAML, it's pretty well known that it will allow arbitrary code construction. Right. If you use it as a default JSON parser to parse user submitted data, which are not supposed to be trusted, just should be untrusted by default, right? And things could happen very, very badly. So always think about what you put into your applications before you put them in.
Does Python have the same? Because like one mega flaw that you get in PHP, they did actually have it in Ruby as well. It's registered global, so it's obviously put
the frameworks, I don't think they have registered globals. No, not the frameworks. There isn't a global request object, at least not in Django. But it depends on the framework you use.
Okay.
So Python's maybe not the thing to say. You probably have to say, does Django have it? And Django doesn't. I don't think it has.
No, I mean the threading models are different, right? Because if you have something global in PHP, it's really global.
Yeah.
Well, each request is a separate thread.
But you certainly have a global variable. It's instantiated, and you read from it, and it's there. You have to deliberately read the request object.
Yeah. So so that's it. Anything else that you wanted to know about?
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
In Django, we put the database username and password in the settings file, and that seems like you're just all you need. If it's a Django site, the first thing you do is you find the settings file, because that seems a little strange. Is that safe somehow? You guys know anything about
I think that's the problem you might have been comparing it with. I mean, if you've got something with PHP and you've got that settings file in the file system, the thing you need to make sure is that that's not exposed. If you're coming through Django, you go through a dispatcher, there is normally no direct link to the file system, so you can't put in the URL and get to the file system and get to that. I guess you do the problem, if someone does compromise that Django instance, then they get the password. I'm not sure how much you could do about that, though. I think it'd be very clunky to do much else. Is that what you mean by it, or?
Yeah, that's the vulnerability, the password exposure is there, and I think you described them saying that it's not that easy to get into the file system.
Well, I mean, anyone that's got access to that set of code there. I mean, the one thing you do need to make sure is if you're checking that stuff in to get and you're putting it somewhere, you shouldn't be putting that in to get with the password. Either you have a different repo for your config management, or you have a configs just not stored in Git at all, and you have a settings local file that's held elsewhere. And so your original settings file is just sort of blank, and your settings local fills that in. So there's some sensible things you should do on top of that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool, that's great.
Okay.
I have a question I was curious about. Has anyone ever here used Perl before?
Perl. Has anybody used Perl before?
Perl.
Yeah, P-E-R-L.
But no one using it these days. It's now regarded as like awful, and it is pretty awful. Perl's just hardware. Sorry? Overdevelopment. Well, it used to be popular, and people wrote big websites in Perl in the past, which is just crazy. And there was CPAN, which was a huge archive of packages, and it did some things that I think even current systems, like PyPy, doesn't do some of the things that CPAN did. But they did do some interesting engineering.
What are those things?
I'm trying to think. There's lots of stuff around unit testing, and it was all very. So they put a lot of engineering into the package stuff in CPAN. There were some things that were done nice in there. Maybe PyPy does do something. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, actually, I have some updates from the PyPy team, the Cheesop team, basically. So, ever since that massive RubyGems.org security fiasco happened, and there were a lot of requests on the catalog. SIG stands for special interest groups. It's like something to copy from ECM. So basically, a lot of software, Python Software Foundation people are going to enable SSL on PyPy downloads and uploads by default sometime fairly soon. And there are a couple of pull requests on pip that basically enables SSL by default, and it will do certificates verification for you. So what that means is that in the future, if there's a package. Okay. Is that coming from Taiwan?
Yeah, it's coming from Taiwan.
Sorry, I'm muting.
Okay. So basically, what happens in the future is that if you have a new package that you want to submit to PyPy, there are two things that you should do. First thing is that most people don't know about this, is that PyPy actually supports signing your package with GPG. And the second thing is that, you should always sign it and submit it over SSL. If you have a package on PyPI now, they will ask you to basically renew your password, or rather just change your password, because they're going to wipe the database very soon. I don't know if you know that, but I think in January it was found out that wiki.python.org was potentially compromised, or was it compromised at all? I don't know. Was it wiped, or I don't even know. Yeah.
They had to rebuild it.
Yeah. So, so apparently that attack was possibly planted since July, and nobody found out. Right? Remember, I talked about prevent, detect, contain, and recover, right? So they failed in every single category. They lost half a year of data. They couldn't prevent it. They couldn't contain it. They couldn't detect it. So this is what's going to happen, even to Python Software Foundation.
Who here is somebody? It's not a living. Who here's had a server compromised at some point? Yeah, I know I have. It's happened. It's anyone else? Not disclosing a liability if you're yeah, okay. I was just curious about how people actually get this stuff. For my case, it was used on XVG.org, and then the guy who's been maintaining the software on it, that was an old version of some code which you hacked into. And I found the tag vector.
Can you hear us, Taiwan?
I think he's dropped now, he's gone off.
Have we? Oh, yeah. Okay.
There was some worm going around.
There's still an error.
Server, and unfortunately, there's no patch out.
So anybody on the other side of the planet has any scary story to share with us, like getting your server compromised?
The one that happened to us was those PHPs. They managed to get a PHP file into a place and get executed and add just an eval into it. Well, an eval which they could put any script as a request parameter and just get eval on the system.
Okay.
So essentially they could do whatever.
Yeah, that's another good point that you just brought up. So apparently PHP, JavaScript, and Python have this function called eval, which is very, very bad if you're not careful. What happens is suppose you're getting smart, you want to have a form that asks for user submitted data, and then you, instead of validating it, you just call eval and turn it into a string. Bad things can happen. Very bad things can happen. On the other side, on the JavaScript, you could also do the same thing, right? Suppose somebody inserted some string that could potentially result in a cross-site scripting attack. When you render it out, if you don't escape it or don't pass it through a JSON parser, you just call eval, things could blow up. PHP is similar, right? So I think a couple of other languages has this thing too. So be very, very careful if you think that you should use eval.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
I think I saw recently that Gmail now offers the option of going through HTTPS.
Yes.
And it seems to be a little heavier, but do you guys, have you heard of this as one way to get around security, or get kind of block some of the security problems?
I haven't heard of anything. Have you? No,
no, I know they defaulted to because
they have defaulted to HTTPS. Well, actually, I do have a story about Gmail to share.
I'm surprised more sites don't actually. It's not like I know it has computational load. The accelerator card you can do also.
Yeah, so number of sites have enabled SSL by default since the attack on Gmail a couple of years ago. Google, even if you do a Google search, chances are if you're logged in, it's SSL enabled. Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, obviously. I think, does any Microsoft sites default to SSL? Like Hotmail and stuff. Yeah?
Microsoft spoke.
Yeah. Like Outlook.com or something, does it use SSL by default? Outlook.com, does it use SSL by default?
I never use that.
Oh, okay.
Do you have an iPhone? No.
So yeah, so actually about Gmail, I do have a kind of scary story to tell. So around 2008, I think I did something horrible to the Chinese government. I signed the OA Charter. If you don't know what that is, look it up. What that means is that I'm probably in the database I'm officially a descendant. So I think right around the guy who wrote the OA Charter was arrested in China, within a day or two, my Gmail account was hacked. So when I logged in, Google basically said, hey, your account was accessed by some IP from China. And immediately I have to change my password. Within a month, it got hacked again. This time, I don't know whether it's from Twitter. My Twitter account was hacked too. So, and then I had to change my Gmail password again and turn on SSL on everything and turn on two-factor authentication on every Google service. So I've been pretty paranoid ever since.
So is there a moral to the story? Is to not
The
use
moral-
the password or to not sign charge?
Right. The moral of the story is that if you decide to be a descendant, always make sure that you don't share your passwords across services. That's it. So, yeah. There's some people are talking in the chat room. I haven't looked at it for like a year. What's that?
How do you know it was hacked? They changed the password?
Google detected it.
Oh, they told you that.
Yeah. Google told me that, hey, all of a sudden your account was accessed by some IP in China. I mean, you would think that they would know how to use Tor, but no, they had to access from China.
It's all from China.
So,
Terrible problem.
At the bottom of your email, you can check like the last.
Yes. About 2 years ago, I wrote this about something like say, and then I shared it. And then you said, there's something wrong in the system, and then Google comment statement about that. Yeah, and then the login from USA on the same time. And please make sure about the please take some action to verify.
right,
Sometimes you have some mishaps on that.
right.
At this moment, I have every vision. Change the password and then set up a two-step verification. And then I say, I will not work this way last time. I will not work it anymore.
Okay,
Yes, because it's very secure from all this stuff.
okay,
People really don't know how to protect this thing.
okay. Yeah. So, so basically another thing that you should worry about is always work with the people that you trust. If you're sharing sensitive data, make sure that you are communicating. When you're sharing them, make sure you're communicating through secure channels, like a secure Dropbox account that only 2 of you know about, right? Secure Dropbox account. That's a that's a little asking too much, but yeah.
Read mega.
Right. Or mega, mega.co.nz. Right? Anything else?
Oh, you know, one other thing is a lot of this is talking about kind of the stuff on the web developer standpoint. But you know, small startups they write the code and the system admins, and
right. So.
You know, detecting when something's wrong, that seems like a whole new world.
So yeah, so how do we detect? So mostly this talk was about preventing, right?
Yeah, you see that can be very difficult. I mean, if it was something automated, which you say is probably your biggest thing, you probably notice when you start doing something like using your server to denial a service something else, which is a very, very common thing to happen. And that's how mine, I get called up my colo provider. You're spewing out, several hundred megabytes a second on your port. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. And that tends to flag you up about it. If it's something that's on there and it's reading data and it's siphoning it away, it can be very difficult to spot that. There is intrusion detection systems, and they tend to more focus on actually you own the network, and you put it outside.
Anything simple that is good for small kind of startups.
I think I can't think of any reasonable suggestions for that. I mean, it's a hard problem. And there's no magic answers to think for that. The main thing is that if you've got the audit trail on there and you're keeping up to date, you're doing the sensible things, then the only thing is damage limitation if it does happen. That's all I can really think of, unless anyone else is good. Splunk, yeah.
Yeah, because that's the cool thing about that is you can monitor, the traffic. You would actually notice probably either if there's a spike or there's something on the post request.
Does Splunk do anomaly detection? So does it flag?
It won't flag you, but it will at least make you more aware of what your server's doing.
Yeah.
And the good thing about it is because it's really easy to search, you can go back through requests and start to narrow down the intrusions a lot quicker.
There's another one you might want to have a look at is there's a package called LogCheck, which I know it's in Debian. I'm not sure how much it spreads to other places, and it does look for some analysis in your logs, and anything that's unusual, it will send you an email of spurious log events, which is quite a good filter to get that kind of sent to you. Particularly pulls up things like pseudo alerts and stuff. Otherwise, maybe if you have some sort of basic graphings of your server, watch for unusual activity on that, spikes are just unusual. Running netstat and looking for open connections that you're not expecting. There's another, there's a piece of software that checks for rootkits. There's a package out there that will check for rootkits, and that used to be well updated. I don't know if it is anymore. You run it, it scans for any unusual processes. It also does some heuristics and looks for things that are weird. You can use that. There's tripwires, and you can use your package database to compare the signatures of files and see if anything in the system's modified. But for a small startup, that's hard. And this is why I say it's difficult to think of things that you could necessarily do. But they used to be popular in the past as well. So tripwire and then checking package checksums might be.
Okay, cool.
Right. I think we're done for.
Yeah. Thank you, Taiwan.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.